The blood-red sunset painted the dusty main street of Las Lunas, New Mexico territory, as Theresa Galloway's left hand trembled against her skirt, not from fear, but from the habit of hiding what had marked her as cursed since the day she was born. The year was 1877, and the Southwest was no place for a woman alone, especially one the townsfolk whispered about. 22-year-old Theresa had learned early that being left-handed was more than inconvenience, it was dangerous. Devil-marked, the preacher back in Virginia had called her when she was just 6 years old, before her parents packed up and headed west, hoping the frontier would be more forgiving. It wasn't. Las Lunas had given her family a fresh start until the fever took both her parents within a week of each other 3 months ago. Now, as she hurried toward her small home at the edge of town, she could feel the stares burning into her back. "There goes the devil's handmaid," someone whispered loudly enough for her to hear. Theresa clutched the basket of supplies tighter with her right hand, keeping her left hidden in the folds of her faded blue dress. The basket held precious little flour, salt, and a few scraps of fabric she'd used to repair her only other dress. The money was running out, and the boarding house where she'd been working had let her go last week when guests complained about being served by her cursed hand. As she rounded the corner past the mercantile, she collided with something solid, a man's chest. The basket tumbled from her grip, spilling her meager supplies into the dirt. "I'm so sorry, miss," came a deep voice, smooth as aged whiskey. Theresa dropped to her knees instantly, scrambling to gather her belongings before they were ruined. Without thinking, she reached out with both hands, her left exposed in the fading light. A strong, tanned hand appeared in her vision, gently picking up the small sack of flour. Theresa froze, waiting for the inevitable disgust or hasty sign of the cross people made when they noticed her using her left hand. "Let me help you," the stranger said, and something in his tone made her look up. Vincent Lawson hadn't planned to stop in Las Lunas. At 30 years old, he'd seen enough small towns to know they all harbored the same narrow minds and tired prejudices. But his horse had thrown a shoe a mile outside of town, and here he was, colliding with the most striking woman he'd ever seen. Her eyes were the color of amber whiskey, wide with a wariness that suggested she expected the worst from people. Dark chestnut hair escaped from her simple bun, framing a face that showed both strength and vulnerability. But what caught his attention most was the way she quickly tried to hide her left hand when she noticed him looking at it. "Thank you," she murmured, accepting the flour sack with her right hand while tucking her left behind her back. "No need to hide it," Vincent said quietly, so only she could hear. "My grandmother was the same, called it her special hand." Theresa's eyes widened in surprise. "Most folks around here call it something else entirely." Vincent straightened to his full height, adjusting his worn leather vest. His clothes were dusty from travel, but quality dark pants, a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, and boots that had seen many miles. The gun at his hip wasn't flashy, but it was well maintained, marking him as someone who understood its purpose beyond intimidation. "People fear what they don't understand," he said, offering her the rest of her supplies. "I'm Vincent Lawson, just passing through." "Theresa Galloway," she replied cautiously. "Thank you for your help, Mr. Lawson." As she reached for the last item, a small tin of tea that had rolled near his boot, their hands brushed. This time, she didn't pull away. "People in town seem mighty interested in our conversation, Miss Galloway," Vincent observed, noticing the stares from passers-by. "Have I stumbled into some local drama?" Theresa's lips pressed into a thin line. "You could say that. You'd best be on your way before my reputation rubs off on you." "And what reputation is that?" the devil-marked woman who dares to live alone," she said with bitter humor. "Wicked enough to bring drought and misfortune just by existing," Vincent's brow furrowed. "Because you're left-handed, seems a mighty small thing to condemn someone over." A sharp laugh escaped her. "Small things are all some folks need." She gathered her basket and stepped back. "Good day, Mr. Lawson. I hope you find Las Lunas more welcoming than I have." Before he could respond, she hurried away, her shoulders squared against the weight of invisible judgment. Vincent watched her go, noting how the townsfolk either stared openly or averted their eyes as if she carried something contagious. His plans to leave at first light suddenly seemed less urgent. He made his way to the town's only hotel, securing a room and stable space for his horse. After arranging for the blacksmith to shoe his gelding in the morning, he found himself at the saloon, listening to the hum of local gossip. "That Galloway woman's bad luck," an old miner was saying to the bartender. "Crops started failing right after her folks died. Ain't natural for her to be living out there alone. Pastor says it's God's will they died, leaving her to face judgment," another added. "Using the devil's hand like she does." Vincent nursed his whiskey, keeping his thoughts to himself. He'd seen this kind of ignorance before, had fought against it, when the same whispers followed his grandmother in their small Illinois town years ago. The old woman had taught him to write with his left hand in secret, telling him it was a gift, not a curse. "Those who fear what's different," she'd said, "are those who have never thought for themselves." The next morning, Vincent visited the blacksmith early, then found himself walking toward the edge of town where he'd seen Theresa heading. Her small house came into view, a modest cabin with a struggling garden and a lone chicken coop. Smoke curled from the chimney, suggesting she was awake despite the early hour. He hesitated at the gate, wondering if his presence would only bring her more trouble. Before he could decide, the door opened and Theresa emerged carrying a bucket, heading toward the well. She stopped short when she saw him. "Mr. Lawson," she said, surprise evident in her voice. "Has your horse recovered, being shoed as we speak?" he replied, removing his hat. "I thought I might offer my assistance before I ride out. Your garden looks like it could use some attention." Suspicion crossed her features. "Why would you help me?" "Because I know what it's like to be judged for something you can't control," he said simply. "And because that chicken coop is about to collapse." A reluctant smile tugged at her lips. "Are you always this forward with women you've just met?" "Only the ones who interest me," he admitted. "And it's not every day I meet someone brave enough to face down an entire town." Theresa studied him for a long moment. "I'm not brave, Mr. Lawson, just stubborn. In my experience, they're often the same thing." He gestured to the bucket. "May I?" After a moment's hesitation, she handed him the bucket and he followed her to the well. As he drew water, Theresa glanced nervously toward town. "People will talk if they see you here," she warned. "Let them," Vincent replied, setting the filled bucket down. "I've never put much stock in other people's opinions." "That's a luxury I can't afford," she said quietly. "My parents moved here for a fresh start, worked themselves to the bone to build this place. I can't just leave because people are unkind." Vincent nodded, understanding the pride and determination that kept her rooted despite the hostility. "Then don't leave, but don't suffer alone either." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. 3 men on horseback appeared on the road, slowing as they neared Theresa's property. "Galloway," called the leader, a heavy-set man with a gray-streaked beard. "Town council's meeting today. Your situation's on the agenda." Theresa's face paled, but her voice remained steady. "What situation would that be, Mr. Blackman?" "Unmarried woman living alone, using witchcraft on her crops," Blackman replied, eyeing Vincent suspiciously. "Who's this?" "Just a traveler," Vincent answered before Theresa could speak. Passing through. Well, traveler, you might want to choose your company more carefully, Blackman advised with a sneer. Meetings at noon, Galloway. Be there. The men rode off, leaving a cloud of dust in their wake. Theresa's hands trembled as she picked up the water bucket. Witchcraft? Vincent asked incredulously. I use my left hand to plant, she explained bitterly. And I don't attend church every Sunday because the pastor uses me as the subject of his sermons on wickedness. That's evidence enough for them. This is madness, Vincent muttered. What do they want from you? To leave, most likely, or marry someone who can control me. She shook her head. I've gotten these summons before. Usually ends with a warning and more whispers. Vincent followed her back to the house, his mind working through the implications. I'll come with you, he decided. You don't need to involve yourself in this, Theresa argued, placing the bucket inside her small kitchen. You're leaving today anyway. Plans change, he said with a shrug. My horse could use another day's rest. The look she gave him was complicated, grateful yet concerned. Why would you risk associating with the town pariah? Vincent stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in her amber eyes. Because I've seen what happens when good people stand by and do nothing. And because there's nothing wrong with you, Theresa Galloway. For a moment she seemed unable to respond, unused to someone defending her. Then she straightened her shoulders. The meeting's in 3 hours. If you're serious about coming, I could use help repairing the chicken coop first. Vincent grinned. I'm at your service, Miss Galloway. They spent the morning working side by side, Vincent mending the coop while Theresa tended her garden. He learned that she supported herself by selling eggs and vegetables, supplemented by sewing work she did at home since most establishments wouldn't employ her. He told her about his years driving cattle in Texas, his brief stint as a deputy in Colorado, and his current plan to purchase land in California. What will you do there? She asked as they sat on her porch, taking a brief rest. Horses, he replied, his eyes lighting up. I've saved enough to start a small breeding operation. Good stock is always in demand. Sounds peaceful, she said wistfully. It could be, he agreed, studying her profile. What would you do if you could do anything? Theresa looked surprised by the question, as if no one had ever asked about her dreams before. I'd like to teach, she admitted. Children don't judge the way adults do, at least not until they're taught to. The hour approached for the town meeting, and Theresa changed into her best dress, a simple blue cotton garment that had seen better days but was clean and mended carefully. Vincent noticed how she pinned her hair more formally, attempting to project respectability. Ready? He asked when she emerged. She nodded, though her expression was tense. Mr. Lawson, Vincent, I appreciate what you're doing, but these people have made up their minds about me long ago. Then it's time they were challenged, he replied, offering his arm. After a moment's hesitation, she placed her left hand on his arm. The gesture wasn't lost on Vincent, who covered her hand with his own briefly. Perfect fit, he said quietly. Theresa's eyes widened slightly, but before she could respond, they began the walk into town. The town hall was already crowded when they arrived. Conversations hushed as Theresa entered with Vincent beside her, whispers immediately rising in their wake. They found seats near the back, where Theresa sat rigidly, eyes forward. Mayor Thornton, a thin man with spectacles and an air of self-importance, called the meeting to order. After discussing road repairs and water rights, he finally arrived at the last item on the agenda. Regarding the matter of Theresa Galloway, he announced, peering over his glasses at her. Several citizens have expressed concern about a single woman living alone on the outskirts of town, especially one who engages in questionable practices. What practices would those be? Vincent called out, his voice carrying clearly through the room. The mayor looked startled. "And you are?" "Vincent Lawson," he replied, standing. "Just curious what questionable practices Miss Galloway is accused of." Blackman rose from his seat near the front. "She uses her left hand, the devil's hand, for everything. Crops failing, wells drying up since she's been on her own. Can't be coincidence." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. "The drought started 2 months before her parents died," Vincent pointed out calmly. "Unless you believe she can control the weather months in advance, your timeline doesn't make sense. Who are you to question our concerns?" demanded the pastor, a severe man with a black coat. "You're a stranger here." "Sometimes it takes a stranger to see clearly," Vincent replied. "I've traveled through 3 territories this past month. Everyone's crops are struggling. It's called a drought, not witchcraft." Theresa stood slowly beside him. "I've lived in Las Lunas for 15 years, she said, her voice shaking slightly at first, then growing stronger. "My parents are buried here. This is my home, and I've never harmed anyone." "Your very presence is an affront to God," the pastor interjected. "Using the hand of Satan, my hand is just a hand," Theresa interrupted, holding up her left one. "The same as yours, only on the opposite side. If God made me this way, who are you to question his design?" A tense silence fell over the room. Vincent noticed a few townspeople shifting uncomfortably, looking less certain. An older woman in the second row cleared her throat. "My sister's boy back east is left-handed, bright as can be, studying to be a doctor now." "This isn't about her hand," Blackman blustered. "It's about a woman living alone, defying natural order. My wife managed our ranch alone for 2 years while I was fighting in the war," said another man near the window. "Nothing unnatural about it." The meeting devolved into heated arguments between those supporting Theresa and those condemning her. Mayor Thornton repeatedly banged his gavel for order. "Enough," he finally shouted. "Miss Galloway has broken no laws. Unless someone has actual evidence of wrongdoing, this council has no grounds to act." The pastor stood again. "Then I propose a solution. If her solitary status concerns us, let her find a husband within 3 months or sell her property and leave Las Lunas." Outrage colored Theresa's features. "You have no right. I'll second that proposal," Blackman interrupted with a smug smile. "For the good of the community." The mayor looked uncomfortable but nodded. "Those in favor?" Hands rose around the room, not a majority, but enough to carry the motion when combined with those who abstained out of fear or indifference. "It's decided then," the mayor declared, avoiding Theresa's gaze. 3 months, Miss Galloway." Vincent placed a steadying hand on Theresa's back as she trembled with barely contained fury. "This isn't legal," he said loudly. "You can't force someone to marry or leave their property." "Town council makes the rules here," Blackman replied. "For everyone's safety." "Safety from what?" Theresa demanded, her voice breaking. "From a woman who writes with her left hand, who plants seeds differently than you do. What are you so afraid of?" No one answered as the meeting was hastily adjourned. Theresa turned and walked out, her dignity intact despite the tears threatening to spill. Vincent caught up to her outside. "Theresa, wait." "I won't cry here," she said fiercely. "Not where they can see." They walked in tense silence back to her home, where Theresa finally let her composure crack. Pacing her small front room, she unleashed years of pent-up frustration. 3 months to find a husband or leave my home," she said incredulously. "As if I'm some diseased animal they need to contain." Vincent leaned against the doorframe, watching her. "It's wrong," he agreed, "and probably wouldn't hold up in territorial court." "And how am I supposed to get to territorial court?" she asked bitterly. "I barely have money for flour, let alone lawyers. You could fight it other ways, he suggested. Not everyone in that meeting was against you. Theresa sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. I've been fighting my whole life, Vincent. Sometimes I wonder if it's worth it. He knelt before her, taking both her hands in his, deliberately including her left. It's worth it, he said firmly. You're worth it. She stared at their joined hands, his large, work-roughened ones enveloping hers. Why do you care so much? You only met me yesterday. Vincent considered the question carefully. When I was 8 years old, my grandmother was driven out of our town for being different, left-handed like you, had remedies and knowledge that scared simple minds. My father didn't stand up for her, was too concerned with what others thought. I promised myself I'd never make that mistake. So I'm your chance for redemption? Theresa asked, withdrawing her hands. No, he replied honestly. You're a brave woman being wronged, and I find myself caring what happens to you. Is that so difficult to believe? Their eyes met, and something shifted in the air between them, an acknowledgement of the connection forming despite the brevity of their acquaintance. I should start supper, Theresa said, breaking the moment. You're welcome to stay since you've involved yourself in my troubles. I'd be honored, Vincent replied with a small smile. That evening they shared a simple meal of beans, cornbread, and the last of Theresa's preserved peaches. By lamplight, she told him more about her life, her childhood in Virginia, her parents' decision to move west after the war, and the gradual shift in how the townspeople viewed her family after her father built their small but successful farm. Things changed when Pastor Wilkins came 5 years ago, she explained. Started preaching about signs of evil, said left-handedness was one such sign. Did your parents defend you? Vincent asked. Always, she said, a sad smile crossing her face. Papa would say God made me special on purpose. But after they died, she trailed off, looking down at her hands. It's harder to believe when you're alone. You're not alone tonight, Vincent reminded her. Later, as he prepared to leave for his hotel room in town, Theresa stood in her doorway, illuminated by the soft glow from inside. Will you be leaving tomorrow? She asked. Vincent studied her face in the golden light. Not if you'd like me to stay. I can't ask that of you, she replied, though her eyes said otherwise. You're not asking, I'm offering. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. 3 months is a long time to face alone. And what happens when the 3 months are up? Theresa challenged. You said yourself you're headed to California. Vincent took her left hand, holding it gently between his. Plans can change, he said softly. The next morning, Vincent returned to Theresa's house with his saddlebags and rifle. He checked out of the hotel, raising eyebrows when he mentioned he'd be staying at the Galloway place for a few days to help with repairs. You're giving them more to talk about, Theresa warned as he stored his belongings in the small shed adjacent to her house, where he insisted on sleeping rather than compromise her reputation further. They'll talk regardless, he replied pragmatically. Might as well give them something substantial. Over the following days, Vincent made good on his promise to help. He repaired the leaky roof, reinforced the chicken coop, and helped clear new ground for planting. Theresa's garden began to show signs of recovery under their combined efforts, and the blessing of an unexpected rainfall. Word spread through Las Lunas about the stranger staying at the devil-marked woman's property. Some whispers grew darker, suggesting she had bewitched him, but others took note of the improvements to her small farm and Vincent's respectful behavior when they came to town for supplies. A week into his stay, they were working together in the garden when hoofbeats announced visitors. Theresa tensed, wiping soil from her hands as 3 riders approached, but these weren't council members. A woman about Theresa's age, accompanied by 2 young men, dismounted at the gate. "Morning, Theresa," called the woman cautiously. Thought you might need some seed potatoes. We had extra." Theresa looked stunned. "Thank you, Martha. That's very kind." Martha Jennings had been one of Theresa's childhood friends until social pressure drove them apart years ago. She approached with a small sack, her brothers hanging back nervously. "What you said at the meeting," Martha said quietly, "about God making you the way you are, it got me thinking." She glanced at her brothers. "Our pa was left-handed too, never thought of him as evil." Theresa accepted the seed potatoes with visible emotion. "Would you like some tea?" she offered. Martha hesitated, then nodded. Just for a little while. This visit marked the beginning of a subtle shift. Other townspeople began to stop by, some out of curiosity about Vincent, others with small offerings or requests for Theresa's skilled sewing, which they had previously avoided. Not everyone's minds were changed, but cracks appeared in the wall of isolation surrounding her. As April turned to May, Vincent showed no signs of continuing his journey west. He and Theresa fell into a comfortable rhythm, working side by side during the day and talking by lamplight in the evenings. He learned she had a quick wit beneath her careful exterior, and she discovered his thoughtful nature masked by his confident demeanor. One evening, as they sat on her porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Theresa finally asked the question that had been building between them. "Why are you still here, Vincent?" He turned to look at her, noting how the sunset gilded her profile. "You know why." "Do I?" she challenged softly. "You're giving up your dream in California to help a woman you barely know fight a town's prejudice. It doesn't make sense." Vincent considered his words carefully. "When I first saw you trying to hide your hand that day, something shifted inside me. I recognized your struggle because I'd seen it before, but it was more than that." He reached for her left hand, tracing his thumb across her palm. "I've been looking for something without knowing what it was. Then I found you." Theresa's breath caught. "Vincent, I'm not asking anything of you," he assured her quickly. "Just explaining why California can wait." She turned her hand in his, interlacing their fingers. "What if I want you to ask?" Their first kiss was tentative, a gentle exploration that quickly deepened into something more urgent. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Theresa leaned her forehead against his. "I've never done this before," she admitted. "Cared for someone who wasn't family." "Neither have I," Vincent confessed. "Not like this." As May progressed, their relationship deepened, though they maintained propriety by Vincent continuing to sleep in the shed. They were careful in town, aware that Theresa's situation remained precarious despite growing acceptance from some quarters. Pastor Wilkins and Blackman, however, increased their opposition. After seeing Vincent and Theresa together at the general store, the pastor devoted his next sermon to the dangers of outsiders who embraced sinful ways. Blackman began suggesting to anyone who would listen that Vincent must be mentally deficient or under some spell to associate with the devil-marked woman. Their campaign gained momentum when the drought worsened again in late May, with a heat wave driving temperatures to unbearable levels. Old superstitions resurfaced, with whispers that Theresa's unnatural ways were bringing punishment upon the town. Vincent returned from the blacksmith one afternoon to find Theresa white-faced on the porch, a crumpled paper in her hand. "What happened?" he asked, taking the steps two at a time. "Someone left this," she said, handing him the note, "while I was gathering eggs." The crude message warned, "Witch and outsider leave or burn." Vincent crushed the paper in his fist, fury evident in the tightness of his jaw. "Who delivered this?" "I didn't see," she replied, her voice remarkably steady. "But there were boot prints by the gate, large ones." That night, Vincent moved his bedroll to Theresa's front room, his rifle within reach. "Just until we know what we're dealing with," he insisted when she protested that she could protect herself. "This is exactly what they want," she argued, "to frighten us into leaving." Vincent studied her determined expression. "Is that what you want, to leave?" "This is my home," Theresa said firmly, "but I won't let you put yourself in danger for me." He took her face between his hands. "I'm exactly where I want to be," he told her, "and I'm not easily frightened." Their resolve was tested 3 nights later when they awoke to the smell of smoke. Vincent bolted upright, grabbing his rifle and rushing to the window. Outside, the chicken coop was ablaze, flames leaping high in the darkness. "Stay inside," he ordered, but Theresa was already grabbing buckets. Together they fought the fire, joined minutes later by neighbors who had seen the glow. Despite their efforts, the coop was destroyed, though they managed to save most of the chickens. As dawn broke, revealing the charred remains, Vincent found a half-empty whiskey bottle at the edge of the property, clear evidence of arson. Sheriff Parker arrived to investigate, his expression grim. "Any idea who might have done this?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already had suspicions. "We have our theories," Vincent replied coldly. The sheriff sighed. "Look, Lawson, I can't arrest someone without evidence, but I'll ask around town." "And if you find who did it?" Theresa asked. Sheriff Parker shifted uncomfortably. "I'll handle it according to the law, Miss Galloway." "That's all I can promise." After he left, Theresa surveyed the damage with a calculated detachment that worried Vincent more than tears would have. "They won't stop," she said quietly. "Not until I'm gone." "Or until they realize you're not leaving," Vincent countered, pulling her into his arms despite the audience of neighbors still helping to clean up. "You're not alone in this fight anymore, Theresa." The fire marked another turning point in town opinion. Many were horrified by the escalation to violence, regardless of their feelings about Theresa's difference. Martha Jennings and her family helped rebuild the chicken coop. The blacksmith refused to serve Blackman, suspecting his involvement. Even Mayor Thornton paid a visit to express his regret about the incident. "The council's decision was ill-considered," he admitted to Theresa. "Made in haste during difficult times. I'll be calling a new vote next meeting." As June arrived, bringing with it a merciful break in the heat wave and some modest rainfall, Vincent and Theresa found themselves with growing support in the community. Not universal acceptance, but enough that the immediate danger seemed to pass. One evening, as they walked back from town after attending a community dinner at Martha's invitation, Vincent stopped at the edge of Theresa's property. The moonlight illuminated the small house, the rebuilt chicken coop, and the thriving garden, all evidence of their shared efforts over the past 2 months. "I've been thinking," he said, taking both her hands in his, "about the council's deadline." Theresa tensed slightly. "What about it?" "You have a month left to either leave or marry." He drew a deep breath. "I'd like to propose a third option." "Which is?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. "Marry me," Vincent said simply. "Not because of their deadline, but because I love you." Theresa's eyes widened. "Vincent, let me finish," he requested gently. "I came to Las Lunas by accident, but meeting you was the most fortunate thing that's ever happened to me. I love your courage, your kindness, your stubbornness. I love how you use your left hand with pride now, how you face down a town's worth of prejudice." Tears glistened in her eyes as he continued. "I'm not asking because of the council. I'm asking because I can't imagine continuing to California or anywhere without you. Because when I hold your hand, it feels like it was made to fit in mine." Theresa blinked back tears. "I've spent my whole life being judged for something I couldn't control, being told I was wrong, evil even, just for being who I am. And I've spent mine learning that those judgments say more about the people making them than those they are aimed at," Vincent replied, brushing a tear from her cheek. "I love you," she whispered, the words seeming to surprise even her. "I think I have since you picked up my flower and didn't flinch when you saw my hand." Vincent smiled. "Is that a yes?" Instead of answering, Theresa reached up with her left hand, her devil-marked hand that had brought her so much pain, and pulled him down for a kiss that left no doubt about her answer. They were married 2 weeks later in a small ceremony in Theresa's garden. Pastor Wilkins refused to officiate, but a circuit judge passing through was happy to do the honors. Martha stood as Theresa's witness, while the blacksmith, who had become Vincent's friend, stood as his. Not everyone from town attended, but enough came to fill the garden with well wishes and celebration. Even Sheriff Parker made an appearance, tipping his hat to the couple with newfound respect. As they stood together under an arbor Vincent had built for the occasion, the judge asked them to join hands for their vows. Without hesitation, Vincent took Theresa's left hand in his right. "Perfect fit," he whispered, echoing his words from months before. Theresa's smile was radiant as she squeezed his hand. "Perfect fit," she agreed. The following days were filled with adjustment to married life, though in many ways little changed in their daily routine. They still worked side by side in the garden, cared for the chickens, and sat on the porch watching sunsets. The difference was in the shared bedroom, the casual touches, the knowledge that they faced whatever came next together. A week after the wedding, Vincent brought up a subject they'd danced around. "I've been thinking about California," he began cautiously over breakfast. Theresa's face remained carefully neutral. "What about it? The land there is good for horses," he continued, "but so is New Mexico territory. Plenty of open space not far from here." Hope bloomed in her eyes. "Are you saying you want to stay?" "I'm saying home isn't a place," Vincent clarified, reaching across the table for her hand. "It's where we are together. But if you want to stay in Las Lunas, I think we could build something good here." Theresa considered his words. "I've only ever known this town," she admitted. "Even with its flaws, it's familiar." "Then we stay," he decided. "Build our horse ranch here. Maybe change a few more minds along the way." The council meeting at the end of July formally rescinded the ultimatum against Theresa. Mayor Thornton, perhaps seeking to save face, framed it as a celebration of her marriage rather than an acknowledgement of their error. Blackman and the pastor remained opposed, but found themselves increasingly isolated as the community moved forward. By the end of summer, Vincent and Theresa had purchased additional land adjacent to her property, beginning the foundation of what would become the Lawson Horse Ranch. The drought finally broke with late summer rains, and the land seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, turning green again after months of brown. Life wasn't without challenges. Some people still crossed the street when they saw Theresa coming, and there were whispers that never completely died. But for every person who kept their distance, another seemed to find the courage to approach, sometimes revealing their own differences they'd hidden for fear of judgment. Martha's younger brother confessed he was left-handed too, but had forced himself to use his right hand after seeing how Theresa was treated. With her encouragement, he began writing with his natural hand again. An elderly woman who'd never spoken to Theresa before brought her a special pair of scissors designed for left-handed use, a family heirloom she'd kept hidden for decades. As autumn painted the landscape in golden hues, Theresa and Vincent sat on their porch, watching the sunset that had become their evening ritual. His arm was around her shoulders, her head resting against him. "I never thought I'd have this," she confessed quietly. "What's that?" Vincent asked, his fingers gently stroking her arm. "Acceptance, love, a future that feels like a promise instead of a threat." She turned to look at him. "You gave me that. You already had it in you, he corrected. I just reminded you it was possible. Theresa took his hand, interlacing their fingers the way she'd done countless times since that first evening on the porch. Do you ever regret stopping in Las Lunas? Vincent smiled, lifting their joined hands to his lips. Best wrong turn I ever made. The first snow of winter dusted Las Lunas in early December, turning the world white and quiet. Vincent finished construction on the first stable for their future horse breeding operation, while Theresa continued to build her sewing business, which had grown as prejudices gradually eased. They celebrated Christmas with friends Martha and her family, the blacksmith and his wife, and several others who had become part of their expanding circle. The home that had once been a place of isolation was now filled with laughter and community. As the new year of 1878 arrived, Theresa and Vincent stood in the doorway of their home, watching fireworks someone had brought from Santa Fe explode over the small town. I have something to tell you, Theresa said, placing Vincent's hand against her stomach. We'll be 3 by next summer. Joy flooded his features as he processed her words. Are you certain? She nodded, tears of happiness shining in her eyes. The midwife confirmed it yesterday. Our child will never know what it's like to be ashamed of who they are. Vincent dropped to his knees, pressing a gentle kiss to her still flat belly. Whether they're right-handed, left-handed, or no-handed, he vowed, they'll know they're perfect exactly as they are. Just like their father, Theresa said, running her fingers through his hair. Vincent stood, pulling her into his arms. Just like their mother, he corrected, the bravest woman I've ever known. The years that followed brought both challenges and joys. Their son, Samuel, was born healthy and strong in July 1878, followed 2 years later by a daughter they named Grace. Both children grew up witnessing the gradual transformation of Las Lunas, from a place of narrow minds to a community that, while not perfect, learned to embrace differences rather than fear them. Samuel showed signs of being right-handed, while Grace followed in her mother's footsteps, naturally favoring her left. Neither child was ever made to feel that their preference was anything but natural, a small victory that meant everything to Theresa. The Lawson Horse Ranch prospered, becoming known throughout the territory for quality stock. Vincent's dream of breeding horses combined with Theresa's business acumen created a legacy that exceeded either of their original ambitions. In 1885, when the territorial government established a new school in Las Lunas, Theresa was invited to teach, fulfilling the dream she'd mentioned to Vincent on that porch so many years before. Her first class included children from families who had once shunned her, now eagerly sending their young ones to learn from the woman once called devil-marked. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Vincent presented Theresa with a special gift, a finely crafted writing desk with the inkwell positioned on the left side, designed specifically for her comfort. As she ran her hand over the smooth wood, tears welled in her eyes. "Remember what you told me when we met?" she asked. "About your grandmother calling it her special hand." Vincent nodded, smiling at the memory. "She was right," Theresa said, raising her left hand. "It led me to you." He took that hand in his, as he had countless times over the years, their fingers fitting together with the familiar perfection that had never diminished. "Perfect fit," he said, the words a cherished refrain between them. "Perfect fit," she echoed, leaning in for a kiss that held a decade of love, struggle, and triumph, and the promise of many more years to come. Las Lunas had transformed, and so had they not by surrendering to prejudice or fleeing from it, but by standing firmly together against the tide of ignorance until it receded. Not everyone had changed their minds, but enough had that the whispers of devil-marked were replaced by respect for the Lawson family and what they had built. As twilight fell on their anniversary day, they sat on the same porch where they had first acknowledged their feelings, now expanded and improved, but still fundamentally the same. Their children played in the yard, their horses grazed in nearby pastures, and the life they had created together stretched out before them. "You ever wonder where we'd be if you hadn't stopped in Las Lunas that day?" Theresa asked, leaning against his shoulder. Vincent considered the question, watching their children's laughter as they chased fireflies in the gathering dusk. "I don't believe in coincidence," he said finally. "I was always meant to find you, even with all the struggle," she questioned. "Especially with the struggle," he assured her, lifting her left hand to his lips. "It's what made us who we are." As stars appeared in the darkening sky, Vincent and Theresa Lawson remained on their porch, hands intertwined left to right to left, a perfect fit, despite a world that had once insisted otherwise.